YouTube? Welcome back. We have a slew of questions here from people who are watching live in Twitch chat. We have been talking about ailments. We've been talking about poison. We've been talking about the way that things used to be before 1.0. So this is a historical perspective on things that have changed in Last Epoch regarding ailments. If you have been playing Last Epoch for a while, this stuff's going to sound familiar to you. If you're a brand new person who's only been playing Last Epoch for a month or maybe 2 months, this will be some good context for why things are the way they are, and maybe it'll help you understand how I, or also people who've been playing this game for a long time, view the cycle of buffs and nerfs regarding ailments. So this is just for ailments. If this is a good video, if you like this kind of stuff, let me know, and we can talk about this in regards to other stuff as well. So what are ailments doing these days? So ailments, if you apply an ailments, remember that if you have 150% chance to apply an ailment on hits, that means that you guarantee apply one ailment, and you have a 50% chance of applying a second stack. So 150% chance to apply a poison on hit always applies one, and there's a 50% chance of applying a second one. So if you're a Path of Exile player, or if you play different video games, you should know that of course it stacks, because many things in Last Epoch stack. So ailments have the same base damage at level 1 as they do at level 100. I'm not going to use exact numbers because I'm lazy, but bleed does something like 50 flat damage, and it deals that damage over 3 seconds or so. So it's like, it's not 50 damage per second, it's like 50 damage over 3 seconds. It's something along those lines. Bear with me. In order to scale bleed damage, we're going to talk about bleed first, because bleed is green. Everybody knows that. In order to scale your ailment damage, you have things like duration. So if you extended the duration, it doesn't stretch out this damage, so like deals less damage over like 4 seconds instead. It just extends it. So 50 damage over 3 seconds is something like, I should have chosen a better number for this. Is like 17.5 something damage. So it's like 17 damage per second, and it happens over 3 seconds. Man, chat, if you like math, you're gonna hate what I'm doing here because I'm butchering math. But if you got 30% increased duration, then all of a sudden your damage would look like this instead. And look, they're all a bunch of little smiley faces. So that's how percent duration works. Suffice it to say, duration is one of the ways that you can scale your ailment damage. You can scale your ailment damage by simply having more stacks of your damage. Bleed is physical damage, so you can have percent increased damage. Percent increased damage, and that would be like physical damage. It scales with damage over time. Let's say that you're applying it. Let's say that you're applying bleeds with hammer throw, which is a sentinel skill, and hammer throw has the dexterity tag, which gives it 4% increased damage per point, and it also has the strength tag, which gives it 4% increased damage per point. These are inherited by the bleeds applied by hammer throw in this brief example, and those all go in the percent increased damage bucket, if that makes sense. So we have duration, we have like more stacks of our bleed ailment, we have percent increased damage, of course we have percent more damage. You should know that if you're applying bleeds with an ailment, if you're applying bleeds with a skill, if there is a generic more multiplier on that skill, your bleeds will deal more damage. If it says the word hits, like hammer throw deals more hit damage, doesn't work. If it says hammer throw deals more direct damage, doesn't work. If it says hammer throw deals more damage, yeah, it works. Good. So these are the kinds of ways you can scale your bleeds. Of course, bleed is a physical thing, so it also scales with penetration. Things like fizz pen, which of course is the exact same thing as physical shred. Physical shred is just like a debuff you put on the enemy, which lowers their resistances. And remember, res can go negative. It's like negative 100% res, something along those lines. So these are the first handful of ways you can scale your bleeds. So we have duration, we have stacks, we have percent increased damage, percent more damage, and percent physical penetration. Percent physical penetration also has this one other thing here. Monsters take more damage. Yeah, sir. Okay, yeah. Monsters taking percent increased damage. Sure. Enemies receive more damage. More increased damage, right? And that thing is like volatile reversal is a sentinel skill. It says enemies take increased damage over time. Sure. That's another bucket over here. Cool. So I was trying to have this one at the end here. So I'm just gonna... Fine, I'll leave it here. More damage. And the reason that I wanted this one at the very end is that there's a fancy line of text that looks so verbose and it's a little bit confusing. So it says physical penetration with bleeds. It's like physical penetration with bleed. And it's long, it's clunky, it's a little bit strange. Why is it there? And we've gotten to the point where now we can explain to you that there used to be a different bucket of damage. There used to be a more multiplier that existed that no longer existed. It was this before it turned into this. So can I like pull up a new one? Let's go Microsoft Paint. Bam, flashbang, sorry. So in the past, we had a different more multiplier and we had something called like bleed effect. Oh, and you might ask yourself, like, bleed effect, that's confusing. What does bleed do? Well, bleed makes the enemies take damage. So bleed effect was making them take more damage. Okay, so now that we've gotten over the entire hurdle of linguistically understanding what this phrase means, what does bleed effect mean? It means more damage. So... the effect of bleed is that enemies take damage. And increasing the effect of enemies taking more damage is that they take even more damage. So this was a more multiplier. That's what we're trying to say. We had bleed effect. We had frostbite effect. And the effect of frostbite was that they took more damage. Pretty straightforward. The effect of electrify. Electrify is kind of a wonky element. And so electrify caused enemies to take damage. So if you increased the effect of that, it gave more damage. So we had a patch previously. Frostbite effect affected the minus. It did affect the minus freeze rate multiplier. That's right. Not anymore. Okay, we're gonna leave that part out because it's not like a damage thing. In any case, there was a patch that changed effects. And it introduced physical penetration with bleed and cold penetration with frostbite and lightning penetration with electrify. And you might ask yourself, well, we had this really elegant thing right here. It's such an easy word. Why did we get rid of it? So we had one down here. We had one as well. It's called poison. So poison effects. If you're a brand new player, you might find yourself asking, why is poison bad? This is you. Why? I don't get it. Why is poison bad? So poison effect, the effect of poison was not just more damage. The effect of poison was also every stack of poison that you placed on the enemy lowered the enemy's poison resistance. And this has an interesting tie-in with something else we'll touch on a little bit later, okay? So, bleed effect was literally more bleed damage. Frostbite effect was literally more frostbite damage. Poison effect was more poison damage, but it also scaled the lower poison resistance at the same time. It was like 5% minus poison res per point, which Every enemy in Last Epoch has 0 resistance and 0 armor, unless explicitly stated otherwise. So this was literally like more damage. To counteract this, I guess I'll use white or something. But to counteract this, Bleed's base damage was something like 50. It's been buffed and changed a couple times, but Frostbite's damage is like 45 or something. Don't worry about the exact numbers. Electrify's damage is something like 45 or something. And Poison's base damage is something like 15. And you're like, man, Poison is way worse than everything else. Don't worry about exact numbers. The reason that Poison looks so much worse than everything else is because of this. But of course, you, with your enormous brain, you could realize that one of the ways to play an ailment is to get more stacks of that ailment. So of course, as soon as you have more than 1 stack of poison, this started to skyrocket. So poison was one of the most busted things that you can do in the game prior to patch 0.9? It was either 0.9 or 0.92. One of those 2 patches when they changed the whole ailment paradigm here. So you would have builds that simply attacked really, really fast. And let's see what this. Click on this word. It's not a graph. I don't care. You would have builds that attacked really, really fast, and it didn't really matter how many more multipliers the skill itself had. It didn't really matter how much generic more damage you had. Didn't really matter about like duration. Didn't really matter about percent increased damage, because as long as you had more and more and more stacks, you could lower the enemy's poison resistance as much as possible. Of course, duration and poison duration meant that you could have more stacks at one time, which meant that you ramped extraordinarily hard on single target bosses. Kind of useless for generic monsters, but you had insane single target damage if you were also building duration on your poison builds back then. So what happened? I guess, do I have to say one more thing? Oh, you know what? We'll say one more thing. Before we talk about what happened in that patch, we'll say this. Bleed has a lot of bleed items that go along with it. So if I pull up like lastepochtools.com here, I can show you, like, we'll type in the word bleed. We'll go items, unique items, bleed. And we have, let's see, we have doublet of Ono's tool for minion bleed. We have Salt the Wound, which supports, I guess, poison as well, but like bleed higher. No, actually, it's the same, isn't it? I thought these were different numbers. All right, so Salt the Wound helps both. But things like Thorn Slinger, Blood of the Exile, let's say, guys, like Taste of Blood helps here. Undisputed has a bunch of percent physical damage on it. Tirani's Brident is a javelin thing. We have Torcreffins. For playing bleed bow builds, we have like Sanguine Horde. We have Flayer's Pride, which is like a very generic shield that had bleed effect on it. It used to have bleed effect, up to 39% more damage instead of this physical damage bleed. But we'll get to that point later. Things like Valdir's Chalice has like really strong support for bleed. Yeah, just like lots and lots of nice generic stuff. The one that probably wins out the most when we talk about this is I'm gonna write the word items here. Ignite. I didn't write Ignite on this chart here, but I should have, because Ignite probably wins out for having the best itemization. When you get to like 3 and 4 LP items, which is insane, but you have things like Calamity for Ignite on hit with fire skills. You have like Malin's Hubris, so like you can stack all of your Ignite chance and Bleed chance, convert everything to Ignite. Burning Avarice supports your playstyle as well. Immolator's Ablation has Ignite duration if you're ignoring the rest of it. Even that can scale you. Fiery Dragon Boots has good Ignite support on it. Ivreen, hopefully you use this for crit, but technically it helps you still. Let's keep scrolling here. We're going to find some more. We're going to find those rings too, right? Weapons. Yeah, Sunwreath. Ooh, yeah. Chance to apply Ignite on melee hit. Increase fire damage over time. Super strong for melee Ignite. Still good for other Ignites as well. Ashen Mortality's cast speed fire damage on it. Like all of these items, Soulfire, Tome of Elements, Kelvin Blasting Agent, not this thing. There's a lot of support for Ignite builds when it comes to itemization. Let's clean up this S real quick. So the important part of this conversation is that if I go poison, the list becomes much, much smaller. So some of these are going to have the word poison on them because like they give poison resistance or something. Salt the Wound is an item that supports poison. Viper Tail supports poison as poison on hits. We have some spears that technically exist. Plague Bearer's Staff, if you can get one with a bunch of LP on it, it's got poison chance on hit here. It's got some other plague stuff as well. This is like maybe the worst item in the game. We're gonna skip over that. Poison damage for damage over time spells, which is poison spell damage. It's not really quite poison. Tongue of the Aberrant Seer. This is probably the best poison support unique item in the game. And it's a tongue. Because it's got a chance to apply poison on spell hit. And you can get it with like a couple LP, like 2 or 3 LP pretty easily. That's about it. I might have made that situation look less dire than it is. But the point is, these other ailments have item support, and poison doesn't really have itemization support. There's daggers that have a chance to poison on hit implicit, and then there's the ring, and that's really about as good as it gets. So the best thing the poison had going for it in the past was the lower the poison res. Okay, so what happened? What happened, and what I hinted at already, is that this bleed effect, frostbite effect, electrify effect, poison effect all got changed into this. Physical penetration with bleed. Cold penetration with frostbite. A lightning penetration with electrify. Poison penetration with poison, in case you forgot what kind of build you were playing. What does that mean? It means you used to have a more multiplier that was distinct from all other more multipliers. It was its own bucket, because when you're doing more multipliers, all of these are multiplicative with one another. Duration, ignore that, but you know what I mean. You used to have a distinct more multiplier that wasn't being lumped in with anything else, and then it got lumped in with penetration. And it got lumped in with shred. And every build already had shred, and your build probably had some physical penetration as well. So you went from having a new more multiplier into not having a new more multiplier. At the same time, what that meant is that poison really caught the brunt of it intentionally, because it used to have poison effect scaling 2 things, more damage and the lower poison res, and now it did not have this anymore. The lower poison resistance left us. So poison got, I think, triple nerfed. Was it double nerf or triple nerf? I say triple nerfed because it feels like a triple nerf. But it got nerfed because of the more multiplier being lumped in with shred, which we just talked about, because it got changed from poison effect to poison penetration with poison. It lost the poison res shred component of the poison effect. And I think the damage went down as well. Didn't they nerf this damage to like 13 or something even lower? My memory is telling me triple nerf. I just don't remember what the third nerf was. Something like that. This got buffed. They buffed the flat damage here. Oh, God bless. What was the triple nerf? Something else got nerfed. We're going to keep talking. We'll see. All right. In any case, so I guess the other thing that happened, capped effects. Oh, they capped this. You're right. Yeah. So I guess poison effect used to. Oh, that is the that is the third nerf, isn't it? Yeah. So poison effect used to scale this, but then poison inherently did that, and they also capped it. Right. Okay. So I forgot that there's like two different components here. Yeah. So it is a triple nerf. Definitely a triple nerf. So poison inherently lowers enemies' poison res, and now it only lowers it by. Where's my? Can I open the in-game guide? I can't, can I? It only lowers it by like the first 30 stacks or something. Like only lowers it by 30%. I'd be logged in, don't I? Fucking, I'll log into the game. Hold on. I knew logging out was gonna be a bad idea here. Let's go pull up our trusty in-game guide and see what exactly is going on. All right, last Epoch, come here. I need you. I need precise numbers. I can only do napkin math for so long. Poison. 28 damage over 3-second duration, strikes 5% up to a maximum of 150% penetration at 30 seconds. Okay. So it only has 150 penetration built into it, whereas it used to have infinite penetration built into it. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3 separate nerfs for poison, whereas everything else only got single nerfed. Got it. I guess I got a compensatory buff to this, raising the base damage, but who cares? So that is what happened there. That's what happened before 1.0. Me, as someone who talks with a lot of people, I play a lot of builds, but more than that, I also talk to a ton of people who know life the game more than I do. And before 1.0, and after this big change here, where everything became like penetration instead of effect, there were basically no poison builds. Which might sound wild to you. The only poison build that I knew about after this change happened and before 1.0 was technically minion poison using Scorpion. And like minion Scorpion poison build was a real build. It is a real build. People enjoy that build. I'm like, that's great, right? But like nothing else, which is wild, totally insane. Like they just obliterated poison from orbit. And the rationale is, again, triple nerfed. And if you were interested in doing poison, why not just do bleed? Or why not just do frostbite? Why not just do electrify or something else instead? So the only thing that's changed since then is the introduction of another Microsoft Paint. No, the only thing that's changed since then is Poison Overload. And Poison Overload is specific to Acolyte, specific to Warlock. But of course, Lich can access it as well. And it gives you an extra 400% penetration. So it doesn't completely undo the nerf to Poison, but it does give you a huge amount of penetration than what you used to have. Because you used to have 150, and then this ups you to 550, right? So what non-Warlock bleed builds are currently top tier? Bleed hammered in. Yeah, there are plenty of bleed builds out there that are good, but we can talk about that later. So my impression of poison right now is that the only poison builds that are actually good are builds that are using poison overload, which means if you told me you were playing a poison lich and you liked it and it was strong, I would believe you. I have played one as well. If you told me that you were playing a poison warlock, I would believe you and I'd say, yeah, poison overload, awesome, great place to be. If you told me that you were playing a poison rogue with acid flask, I hear you. I think explosive trap is good, and that's like a different conversation altogether. But it's more of like, it's a thing you can do, but I'd rather just play it as something else instead. In regards to acid flask proccing, or sorry, in regards to like explosive trap proccing, acid flask, and scaling poison damage, you could technically do that. I would be asking you, is your build better if you play as crits? Which I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. And the other question is, would your build be better as Frostbite? So we're going to use this. We're going to use this as a way to pivot to things that are still very, very strong in regards to ailments. Because remember, this whole conversation started with what did ailments look like before 1.0 and what do they look like after 1.0. So I'm happy that Amarathi is in chat right now because I just gave him a shout out before he got here. So Amarathi, welcome back. We were just talking about Frostbite being super strong. Set items, by and large, in Last Epoch are not very good. But what is good in Last Epoch is unofficial set items. Unofficial set items are giga strong. So what does Frostbite do? Frostbite has some of the best itemization in Last Epoch. It also happens to have a lot of support in the classes that support it. So like, not every class supports Frostbite, but like a couple things off the top of my head, like Swarmblade form as a druid has insane support for Frostbite. It's very, very strong. Shaman has a handful of support for Frostbite as well. Mage has good Frostbite support because of its gear. And then like a handful of skills that support Frostbite as well. So like, is a Frostbite hammer throw build going to be top tier? Probably not, but now that I say those words out loud, I would love to see it. I would totally love to see it. So what is Frostbite doing that's so good? Let's pull it up. We got letools.com over here. Let's pull up Frostbite. And we're going to pull up the unofficial Frostbite set. If you played Last Epoch for more than 10 minutes, you already know what this is. With the Frostbite Shackles, some people use this on their low life builds to get a whole bunch of ward retention, but this thing has a 140% chance to Frostbite on hit, which is a fat chance. It's also one of your very, very few, if only, sources of Frostbite duration. On top of that, it even gives you freeze rate multi. Why is freeze rate multi good? Well, good thing that you should ask. Let's go find out. Freeze rate multi scales into the other half of the unofficial Frostbite set, which is the Snowdrift pair of boots. Snowdrift has another 32% chance to apply Frostbite on hits, which is cozy, it's great. And then it has this line of text. This used to be Frostbite effect. This used to be literally more damage with Frostbite per freeze rate multi, which was insane. It's been nerfed because it's now cold penetration instead. It's still insane. 2% cold penetration with Frostbite per 10% freeze rate multi. And looking at how you're going to build your characters, 10% freeze rate multi, go look at like any old ring that you have and grab like freeze rate multi. Tier 7 gives you 300. That's another 30 penetration. It's really, really high. Freeze rate multi, of course, also scales how well you're going to freeze monsters. And it turns out Frostbite builds get an extra layer of defense by just freezing things really, really well. So that's the unofficial Frostbite set. And that is the build that has, or sorry, that's the ailment that has the best itemization in Last Epoch because it just scales so goddamn hard. It also happens to have things like elemental damage over time. And remember, Ellie Dot scales the highest of all the percent increased affixes on your gear. Generic percent increased damage. Or I guess I shouldn't say generic, but like most things like percent spell damage, percent cold, percent poison damage. All of these are like fine. And then the 2% increased damage values that scale the lowest are the generic ones. So like percent increased elemental damage. Not Ellie Dot. Ellie Dot's the good one. But like percent increased elemental damage and percent increased melee damage are both like bad. They both just really don't shine. They roll numerically lower than anything else does. Let's show you what that looks like real quick, because this is another part of why Frostbite is so good. Remember, elemental damage over time goes up to 220 at max roll. Things like cold damage goes to 120. Things like spell damage goes to 120. Things like physical damage goes to 120. Things like elemental damage only go to 90. They're just smaller numerical numbers than anything else. which is kind of a funny thing to make fun of, because why do these things even exist? Don't know. So we talked about Frostbite being good because it has excellent itemization. We talked about, let's see, how many documents do we have open here? We talked about bleed effect, Frostbite effect, and how the effect used to give more damage, and instead, these days, it got lumped in with your bucket of damage over here. So you're getting something that you already have. And I am going to glance over Twitch chat to see if there's anything else we haven't talked about yet. Let's see. Cool. I think that's about it. Somebody asked, why is poison duration good? We talked about poison duration being good because in the past it meant that you could stack up all of your shred to infinity and get like trillion damage. Currently, poison duration is good because it helps you maintain the capped 150% penetration. But like every build should be able to get 30 stacks of 30 stacks in here anyways. So I would say poison is like, unless you're playing a warlock or a lich, you're not playing a poison build. And if you are playing one of those, I guess you can get duration, I suppose, but duration's about as good for you as it is for anyone else, generically speaking. So yeah, duration is just more damage per poison. It's like, it gives you better single target damage because you ramp up more when you're building your duration stuff here. So what does this mean? What's the key takeaway, chat? The key takeaway? Let's think for like 30 seconds, maybe 5 seconds. The key takeaway, someone mentioned at the very beginning that you have the same base damage for bleed and any element at level 1 as you do at level 100. It's the same base damage. This, EHG, if you're listening, this is something that they could change. This does not need to be this way. We have things in the game that you might not know exist. We have something called minion power, by the way. I'm just going to read this to you because this is exactly what they could do with ailments if they wanted to make them more balanced. What's unbalanced about ailments? Ailments are like giga strong early game. Fun fact, the best affix that you can get on your gear early game before like level 10 in terms of damage is anything that applies an ailment, because ailments are so strong early game. If EHG wanted to change this, they would do the minion power thing. They would introduce something called ailment power. So minion power, for those of you who don't know that this exists, because why would you? It says from level 26 onward, you gain 0.6 minion power per level. Minion power increases the damage that your minions deal and reduces the damage that they take. Both of these effects are multiplicative. This means that at level 100, your minions automatically deal 45% more damage and they automatically take 45% less damage. This is already in the game. They could have ailment power. And they could just balance ailments the exact same way that they balanced minions. Lamau, imagine calling minions balanced. But like, you know what I mean? They could do this right now. What's another takeaway that you could have for this? You could say, you could introduce more poison itemization. Because poison has been nerfed a couple times recently, they could introduce some more poison stuff there. What else is a good takeaway? Is duration an interesting stat? Duration only ramps your single target. I kind of feel like duration could just be like bonked out of the game. I don't know. Maybe. Duration's terrible. It's the one that should have gone. You think duration should have gone instead of effect? Yeah, maybe. Duration Boring. Yeah, there you go. There's another like key takeaway. These are key takeaways for like EHG and for Twitch chat. Things that we're learning. Duration's boring because who on earth wants to wait for 12 seconds for something to die? Yeah. Something that I like making fun of is taking the action out of action RPGs. And duration scaling, that does take the scaling, or does take the action out of an action RPG. What else is interesting here? Something else that you could talk about is differentiating ailments. How are ailments different? How do you decide whether your build is supposed to go bleed or something else? Like, do I go bleed? Do I go frostbite? Do I go electrify? And it basically depends on what you have access to. So, like, if you're playing a Sentinel, Sentinel has items that say % chance to bleed while holding an axe. So if you're playing a Sentinel ailment build, you're probably playing bleed. Or if you're using Malin's Hubris pair of gloves, maybe you grab all of your bleed itemization and then you convert to ignite like this. Maybe that's something that you do as a Sentinel. But like, how do you decide that your Sentinel build isn't going to be Frostbite? It's like, well, there's literally no support anywhere for Frostbite. So maybe just don't. Or if you do, don't expect too much of it. How do you decide that your rogue build should be bleed instead of being poison? Here, this is how you decide. Right? Poison got triple nerfed. And the only thing that got buffed since then is the introduction of Poison Overload for Warlock and Lich. So, unless you're playing a Warlock or a Lich, you just don't go Poison. It's real easy because everything got nerfed. Some people are mentioning faster ailments. There's some cool stuff out there. There's a one-handed axe called Taste of Blood that makes your bleeds happen faster. I had a build contest for Taste of Blood, and it ended up being a very boring contest. It actually turned into an unofficial contest for Symbol of Demise, because Symbol of Demise was the only remotely interesting thing that you could do with Taste of Blood. So that's what my build contest warped into, because it was actually a Taste of Blood contest, but it turned into a Symbol of Demise contest. These days, you can do really fucking cheesy stuff with Healing Hands. I find that boring because Healing Hands Ward Generation is going to be nerfed. So I don't really care about calling out those builds. But Symbol of Demise is basically an item that does not exist. So, you know. The very last thing that I'd like to say here, as long as we're talking about, like, these are key takeaways for ailments, what EHG could do in the future, for example. One thing that I really like as a differentiator between ailments is the idea of consumes. And by and large, consuming an ailment is not a good choice. Like, you consume all stacks and they all deal their damage instantly. So people love to call out like the puncture node mutilate. Instead of applying bleed, the greater punction consumes all stacks, causing them to deal damage instantly. And it says instead of applying bleed. So instead of dealing more damage, it causes the damage to happen instantly. Which is like, wouldn't you rather just deal more damage? So consumes are basically bad, in my opinion. Because like the enemies are going to die anyways. Just keep dealing damage. Why not? On the other hand, there are plenty of nodes out there that consume ignites and cause the ignites to deal more damage. And I'm a big fan of like this is turning into like it's turning into like a design conversation. So I promise to end this video after this. But I love top-down design and I love themes. I love things that like are just like dripping with flavor. You know what I mean? So consuming bleeds doesn't make me think of anything in the real world that's associated with a bleed. Like, what's a bleed pop? Is that like popping a... Never mind. That's gross. On the other hand, popping a ignite is awesome. Because when I think about popping an ignite, it reminds me of like a grenade or something. And like it goes like... and they go... right? Oh my god. And I love the idea of popping ignites. So I do feel as though one of the ways that EHG could continue to differentiate ignites for like, why is ignite different than Frostbite? Well, Frostbite's better because that has better items, but you know, one of the themes of ignite could be nodes like conflagrate in enchant weapon as a mage. This says that it consumes all stacks of ignite, causing the damage to be dealt instantly. But then the next node puts a more multiplier. So all the ignites consumed this way deal more damage. And this seems like a really cool way that, like, in terms of top-down design flavor, this is something that EHG could do. It's like, oh, maybe all ignites kind of have the flavor of being a bomb or being dynamite or being like a grenade. Like, you apply a bunch of them and then you blow it up. And you're not only blowing up so the damage happens faster, you're also blowing things up because you get a bonus more damage multiplier out of it. For, you know, this is your reward for putting up with the 2-button playstyle kind of thing. That's awesome. All right, so we did a nice little history lesson. That's cool. We talked about how to scale ailments. That's cool too. And then we talked about what EHG could do in the future for changing or for scaling ailments or for introducing more itemization for poison stuff. And then we talked about a little bit of flavor stuff at the very end. How informative is this? Wildly informative? Wildly interesting, but only a little bit informative? We'll find out. If you like these kinds of videos of rambling and talking with Twitch chat about a particular topic, let me know, because this is fun for me. Hopefully it's fun for you too. See you next time.